Good morning and welcome back to Turn the Page. We're so glad that you're. Oh, Adam.
Yeah, no, I didn't want you to do this alone.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us this
It
morning.
is my pleasure.
Yeah, we're excited. We are in chapters. Where's
I
your
lost my
book?
book.
Look at. I believe our producer is gonna hand that over here.
There it is.
We are chapters 19 to 22.
21. Right?
Excuse me. Yes, 21. Chapters 19 through 21 this morning. We are in part 2. I would love to know from you watching this, whether you're watching live right now or you're watching later, put in the comment section, are you reading this book? Are you enjoying the book? Or are you just kind of following along with the videos and catching the nuggets that we're getting out of it? Yeah.
I think, you could learn a lot, and there's a ton of wisdom in this book and just watching this, but there's just something about reading it and letting God speak to you or letting the words speak to you themselves. And because one of the things I love when we study this and talk to each other is like, you'll pull something that I didn't even think of, and I'm like, oh, that's really good.
Yeah.
So hopefully everybody's reading along because I think it's a very powerful way.
Yeah, so part 2, kind of give us a brief synopsis, Adam. What is happening in part 2? Because we've, up to this point, really read about the struggle with David and Saul, and David really submitting to what he says over and over again, especially in the Bibles. He says that Saul is God's anointed. And so as long as Saul is in a position of leadership, that really leadership placed by God, that he's going to either submit or run away. He ran away because Saul was throwing spears, but he always respected.
It's a good time to run away.
It is. Yeah, zigzag, for sure.
Bob and weave.
But that's what we've read up until this point. So part 2, what are we diving into?
So part 2 flips. It jumps into the future, and now David is king. Saul has passed away, and David is the king. And he's been king for a little while. And we don't kind of know that starting off, but you begin to pick that up through different clues as it's going on. So in part 2, David has now become the king, and he's overseeing the kingdom. And so I think it's interesting to see, like, okay, he did everything the right way to become king. Now, does that mean that he'll have a peaceful kingdom and he'll have harmony and all of these things? And so that's what we're going to dive into and find out. But David is king, and we're about to see some other, we'll say, characters enter the stage that play a part in what happens.
Yeah, so the character that is going to be highlighted throughout the next several chapters is Absalom. And Absalom is David's son. And so, I'll be honest, something that is kind of difficult to observe here is that David waited and honored God and it was almost like he didn't pursue the palace.
Yeah.
Like he was anointed by a prophet. He went back to shepherding, and then he finally got almost like God opened the door for him to get into the palace because he was singing and playing songs for King Saul. And even then he wasn't like, well, I know I'm anointed to be king. I'm going to take this as soon as the opportunity arises. Yeah. He waited. He honored God. And once Saul had died, then he took reign of the kingdom. It's like he did it the right way. Mm-hmm. And as far as we know, reading through all of Samuel and different places where we read about King David, I mean, he's not perfect, so he makes mistakes. We see what happens with David and Bathsheba, but outside of that, do we really see that David is a bad king or a ungodly king?
No, I mean, nowhere that I can see. In fact, again, like you said, there are times when he does certain things. But yeah, overall, he's a good king. I think he treats people fairly, like he fights off the enemies of Israel.
Maybe you've lived with this maybe false narrative as well. But I've always thought if you do the right thing and you honor God, then things are going to go your way.
Yeah, I've definitely thought that a lot in my life, and
it doesn't seem that that's the case.
It is not the case. It's absolutely not the case. And in fact, if we're being honest, that's not what the Bible teaches either. Like, this is our own narrative.
Right.
Jesus never said, hey, honor me, and everything will go great for you.
But you know, we feel that way. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's easy to feel that way. And so in chapter 20, I don't know if you have anything from 19.
Well, I think we should at least just set it up.
Yeah,
so
yeah, go ahead.
Chapter 19 is where we get the first look that David is now king. And so it shows us, okay, we've moved forward in this story. We've moved forward in time. And so there's a young boy, and they're asking questions. And all the people are saying, oh, look, here comes David. But they're saying it jokingly. And so the young boy's going, that's Absalom. Why are people saying, hey, here comes David? And the man who was with the little boy said, they're saying that he reminds them of David when David was young. He's handsome. He's strong. He seems to be wise. He listens to the people. And so a lot of this stuff's going on. And so it's kind of setting the stage of this part of David's life and his when he's the king mirrors in many ways him and Saul. And so it's an interesting question because it goes, will David act the way Saul did, or will he still act the way he acts? And will Absalom act the way David acted, or will he act differently? And so that's kind of setting up the whole second part of this story.
And we're going to learn real quick. Absalom does not act the way that David acted.
Spoiler alert.
And
All right.
David does not act the way that Saul acted, which is encouraging because it's like,
Yeah.
hey, regardless of your situation, always be consistent with what? Honoring God.
Yeah.
Like live for him, right? And so, but in chapter 20, this is on page 57, you see kind of the beginning of the issue, right?
Yep.
Because people see Absalom as humble, respectful. He's this good guy, which means he can wear a really good mask. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
But it says, and on that page it says, as he discussed problem after problem and solution after solution, men began to long for the day when this man would become their leader.
And I think, like you said, the problem becomes really clear because Absalom started meeting with people for the sole purpose of, hey, tell me what you see that's wrong. I'll side with you. I'll tell you, oh, yeah, there's injustice. You're right. That should not be. Oh, yeah, you've been ignored. Oh, yeah, you're wise and nobody's listening to you. He began to just slowly listen to everybody. And I got to be honest, it is easy to point out the problems in any kingdom, any job, any church, any family. That's no great skill.
Right.
So Absalom would begin meeting with all these people and just being like, yeah, you're right. Oh, look how bad this is. Oh, you're so wise to see that. Oh, you're right. You were wronged.
Earning favor.
Yeah.
And it's hard to know if it started out with him wanting to earn the favor in order to take the kingdom, or if it started out as a genuine, like, hey, I care about the people. Like I want to see where they're at. I want to see if it's part of the royal family. Like I can do anything to help. Like it's hard to know where it started, but it's easy to see where it led.
So on the flip side of that, for what Absalom did, what does the Bible teach us to do if we have issues? Because I think that's important. We go, oh yeah, it's clear that what he's doing is wrong, but like, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, we're supposed to take it to the person directly.
Yeah, and I think obviously as Christians, that's a really hard thing. You never want to go to somebody and be like, hey, I'm offended by you, or hey, I think you're doing something wrong, or hey, like those are really, really hard conversations. Nobody wants to do that. It's much easier to go to somebody and go, do you see this? Look how bad that is. And have somebody go, yeah, that's terrible. That's stupid. You're right. You're wise. Oh man, this is a bad situation. You should get out of that. Or oh man, if you were in charge, there's so many ways that could go. But I think it's important to realize that's not what the Bible has asked us to do.
Right. No, so true. So good.
And I love on page 59. So after a while, Absalom just listens for a long time, sympathizes, kind of, all this. But finally, on page 59, he said his righteous anger finally broke out in cool, controlled words of strength. These things ought not be. He stood, his eyes blazing. If I were in responsibility, this is what I would do.
And the very next words on the next page say, and with these words, the rebellion was ignited.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we're getting to in these couple of chapters. Is we're talking about the spirit of rebellion and how that can start off as something that seems innocent, but ultimately can become something destructive, something that splits a kingdom, something that causes dissension. It could be a dangerous thing. And so is that we had like a lengthy discussion about rebellion the other day. Does that
Yeah.
mean that we just submit to whatever anybody in authority is telling us to do? No. Like there is a biblical way to handle things, right? If anyone in leadership, whether that's your pastor, your boss, your government, if they're asking you to do something that is clearly a sin or against the nature and the kingdom of God, that's when we go, I am still submitting to authority, but to the authority and not man authority, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the things we teach in our growth track class when we talk about the heart and the operations of Mission City is we talk about how important unity is to the church, and in that
Yeah.
we say we are not saying you can't disagree, but how you disagree matters, and I think that this is important. You should not, like you said, follow any kind of authority or rule that's going to make you sin or have you disobey God or anything like that.
Yeah.
But even in that, how you disagree, how you refuse to do that, I think matters.
Well, how did David leave? Remember what the book said? David left alone.
Yeah.
David didn't
And he
bring,
left.
He didn't bring people
di-
with him.
He didn't say you're asking me to do something I know God hasn't intended, so I'll kill you or I'll fight you or any of these other things. There's a million things you could do. David left, and he left alone.
And he left alone. And Absalom is doing something different here, and something that I highlighted on page 63 that really stood out to me and resonated with me is it says that such men as Absalom can envision no problems in their own future kingdom.
Yeah. I was Absalom at one point in my life.
I was too.
You start learning leadership and you start growing and you start getting just better at things like public speaking or dealing with people and all these things. And pretty soon it's easy to go, man, I got this. Man, if I could just lead the thing or be in charge or whatever, be promoted, I would have all the solutions.
Yeah, and I mean it sounds silly, but it's true. Like when you become good at identifying problems,
Yep.
then you feel as though you will be ultimately so much better of a leader, and you don't foresee any issues because for me, I'm like, well, I lead so differently than the person who was before me. So naturally, whenever I take over, everything is going to be better because I lead different. I see all of the problems with the way that things are now, and the way I lead will absolve all of those problems.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
what you don't realize is that the way you lead has its own full set of problems and issues that people will have.
Yeah.
They'll look different, but they're not going to go away.
Nope.
And I love that it says, what will Absalom do when people stop following him willingly? Now there is the question. It says, because you see, there is no kingdom without discord. And watch this. Even God had his critics in heaven.
Yeah.
I mean, if God had a critic in heaven with Satan, what makes you think that you will be so much better of a leader that there's going to be no issues and that there's not going to be any discord? And so every kingdom has its own discord. And what happens when someone like Absalom wants to take over in a way that doesn't honor God, and then the people decide to not follow willingly?
Yeah, so that's the thing is it's easy when you're dreaming about being a leader or in a position or any of those things and you want to give people the freedom to do whatever. It's easy when somebody's coming to you with a hypothetical. Hey, I see this going on. I don't think it's right. Oh, what would you do? I'd do this. Yeah, that sounds great. It's easy to give people freedom then. But once you're in leadership, you stop doing that because if you gave everybody freedom, it's going in different directions. There could be anarchy. There could be opposing things that are happening. All these things. As a leader, it's your job to kind of set healthy boundaries. It's your job to set direction. It's your job to tell some people no. And so by doing that, you limit freedom. And then if they don't want to listen, then what will you do? Well, for a bad leader, then they impose more rules or more restrictions, and they try to make you follow, not because you want to, but because you have to obey the rule. Or if you live in Absalom's time, you send a guard over with a sword, and you kill him, or you force them to do it because you make them a slave, or any of those things. But leadership by allowing people to choose to follow is very difficult. And people who don't have that heart, it's very quickly and easily they just turn to rules or they turn to forcing you to do things.
Yeah. The next page says, rebels who ascend to the throne by rebellion have no patience with other rebels
Yeah.
and their rebellions. When Absalom is faced with rebellion, he will become a tyrant. He will bring 10 times the evil he sees in your present king. Because he's already not honoring God in the way that he's taking the throne.
Yeah.
Right? And so why would he honor God in the way that he leads?
And it's so difficult because I have fallen into this many, many times in my life. I want my leaders to be perfect. I expect them to be perfect. I don't know why. I just do. And so it's hard to remember that, man, every leader, they're just a man or a woman. They have their flaws, and hopefully they're trying their best in seeking God and all those things. I love and this is my last favorite quote from these chapters that we're talking about. It's found on page 64 if you're following along. And it says, "No rebellion in the kingdom of God is proper, nor can it be fully blessed." So
Wow. That's good.
and that goes down to the heart. You know, God is always more concerned with heart than circumstance. Time and time again, he's proven this in his word. And I think even if you rebelled and set a circumstance, and I would say a temporary circumstance, right, what is in your heart? That's more what he's concerned about. And if that came from rebellion, like not a healthy, a sinful rebellion, you can't bless that.
Yeah. So practically speaking, let's pull this back because obviously we're reading in the book. We're talking about the day of David and Absalom. Let's talk about here and now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we touched on it a little bit before, but from kind of the principles that we're learning in this book, from what to do and what not to do, what should you do if you are encountering issues with your leadership and you start to surround yourself with other people who have the same issues with leadership? If you kind of find yourself in that situation, what is a biblical approach? What should we do?
Well, I think one, pray, ask God, create in me a clean heart. If there's rebellion in me, help get that out. Biblically, we're supposed to go to that person, and honestly, it's not even only I think a leader or a boss above you. This even works like laterally. I remember when I worked for Hyatt, I was working with a coworker. We'd kind of worked there about the same amount of time, and I kind of caught wind that this person was going to be promoted to be an assistant manager and then become above me. Well, I saw so much that this person was doing that the management didn't, shady stuff and just poor character stuff, and I was like, why would you pick them over me? Or why would you pick them over even anybody else? You don't see all this stuff. And I was very tempted to go to the boss and tell them, hey, you need to know about all this stuff. You're talking about promoting this person and you should know. But I never went to that person, which obviously would have been a very hard conversation to have. And so I avoided it. But biblically speaking, I think we need to, if we have an issue, if we have a problem, we need to go to the one that we have a problem with, or we need to go to that leader and share those concerns. Oftentimes when I've done this or when this has happened, I've been blown away at what I didn't know. I went in thinking, look, I see this clearly. This is a problem, da-da-da-da-da. You got to fix this, or let me tell you. And then as they began to share things that I had never thought to ask before, I was like, oh.
Yeah. Adam and myself have learned through doing it the wrong way that oftentimes healthy confrontation begins with asking questions and not making accusations.
Yeah.
So if you have issues with people, I think that's so valuable what you said. You want to address them, but the best way to address them is to start with question. Hey, I noticed this issue.
Yeah.
Can you share with me your side? Why is this happening? Or, questions oftentimes allow you to enter the conversation with a lot more favor than when you come in with an accusation.
And humility.
And
I think people are willing to listen or have a discourse with you if there's a level of humility there. If you come in saying, hey, I see this and it's terrible and da-da, it's like, man, are you even in a position where you would receive what I have to say right now? What's the point of, trying to explain it to you?
And obviously the biblical way and what we're even talking about, it all leads back to what Jesus said was the greatest commandment. To love God, right?
Yep.
First thing you said, pray, and then love people. You want to address issues that make it very clear that, hey, I love the Lord. and I love you as I do myself, and that's why we're bringing up this issue.
Yeah.
And so, healthy confrontation. Praise
Yeah.
God. Well, hey,
Hallelujah.
thank you for joining us today on Turn the Page. Next week, we will be diving into chapter 22.
22 through 24.
22 through 24. So we'd love to join you again next week. We hope you have a blessed rest of your week. And you can find us right here on this page, Sunday at 9 and 11. We're going live with Sunday service.
It's been a pleasure. We'll see you next time.